Tina, I need this.
Yeah, yeah, we all do, right? It was a good reminder for myself putting it together of
Yeah, I bet.
the way to manage my stress during this time.
Well, Todd, you are good to kick. It is 2 o'clock, so if you want to kick this off.
Awesome. For those of you guys who aren't part of our chapter, thank you for joining us. Olivia at EO Global has been helpful getting the word out about these, and our own Amy has been amazing at keeping the invites rolling, kind of the updates rolling. And Matt, special thanks to you. I know how much work this has evolved to be the MC for all of these events, but they proved to be super valuable. Continue to get great feedback. We have a number of them coming up. Matt, I think you'll review those at the end of the call, but I'd also like to say that we continue to update and provide recordings of all of our webinars, eoraleigh.com/coronavirus, where materials and updates are available. Matt and my email addresses will be in the notes section. If you guys have ideas about future webinars, we'd love to hear them. But I think I'll just turn over to Matt for the ground rules, and I'm going to sit back as a passenger and try to get myself together.
Awesome, Todd. Thanks so much. I'm going to quickly just promote a couple of things coming up. Next Thursday at the same time, how are we going to science our way out of the coronavirus? We have Dr. Giles Shea and a panel of experts talking about everything you'd ever want to know about coronavirus. And it's interactive. It's meant for you to ask questions. So unlike watching on TV, you can talk with them and ask things that you've been wanting to ask. We then have Culture Index, which is a national company that applies behavioral analytics to identify and measure capabilities. They are Thursday the 30th at 2 o'clock. And they're going to be sending out a survey in advance that you can take, and they're going to talk about those results, not yours specifically, but results and how to look at those and how to work with your teams with those types of that type of information on Thursday the 30th. And the big news right now is May 7th, we have Dr. Bell. So this would normally be like a national EO global type of event, but he's going to come on and do a whole thing on how to get yourself, your people, and your business starting to sprint again on May 7th. Today's topic is going to be critical stress management skills with Dr. Tina Lepage. She's an EO Raleigh member. Just quick housekeeping is if you have a question that you would like to ask, we want this to be as interactive as possible. Just raise your hand with the raise your hand button. And then as soon as we have a chance, we're going to call on you. But again, as interactive as possible. If you are shy and you don't want to ask it out loud, just write it down in the Q&A panel, and then I can ask it for you. For a couple other notes, today's webinar is recorded, so don't share anything you don't want shared out to the group. And everything, Tina's deck, this recording, will all be at eoraleigh.com/coronavirus. All that being said, I'm turning it over to Dr. Tina. Take it, Tina.
Thanks, Matt. So today we're going to talk about critical stress management skills during this crisis. So for most of you, it's not that stress management skills are new. You've heard these talked about before. You probably try to employ them in your own life at times. But certainly at this moment, stress management is important because people are feeling so stressed. What I'm going to encourage you to do as I'm talking is not so much try to certainly write down anything that I say, because the notes will be available later as part of the PowerPoint. But what I would encourage you to do during this time is to really think about your current situation right now. And as we're kind of flipping through and going through all of the different possible stress management techniques that you could employ, you're not going to be able to do all of these things. So think about what resonates with you and sort of jot down some ideas of what you can start to do for yourself, your employees, your family, or those around you to help with stress management during this time. So coronavirus, part of what's so different about it, I don't have to say out loud, is this is amazingly different lifestyle for us. Businesses are shut down. We are stuck at home. Most of us have never lived under anything like this in terms of stay-at-home orders, businesses closing, not even being able to do something as simple without stress as going to the grocery store, and staying away from our friends and family. And what that does is it puts people into a fear zone. So when we have this much stress all at once, and really amazingly having stress across the country all at the same time, it throws us way, way, way out of our comfort zone. And for human beings, that tends to put us into a fear zone where we are not as effective, not as able to get things done and live in a healthy way. And so the things that we're going to talk about today in terms of stress management are things that when you look at these circles up here, try to help people get into the learning zone or the growth zone so that you don't stay stuck in stress in the fear zone. There are a lot of new fears people have too. As I said, it's a unique time. People are worried not just about their health, but about their finances and about their social relationships and things different than what they've had to think about before. And along with all of those fears is a real loss for people. So some people have experienced loved ones who have passed away. Others have loss of revenue, jobs, just a loss of stability, which is really huge, and feeling that loss of stability in others around you as well. And then there's just what's harder to define, which is the loss of normalcy, which is very stressful to people. There are a lot of new rules and new roles that we are all taking on all at the same time. That again causes a collective sense of stress. As a species, we really like a lot of routine. We like to know what we're doing. We, you know, as much as a new role can be exciting when you're not in the midst of stress, having to have everything change at once, where you're working from home and you're homeschooling your kids and you're, you're trying to figure out how to get things done that you need to get done, causes a high amount of stress. And so it's really important at this time that those of us who are leaders and in leadership roles are able to sort of steer the ship, manage our own stress, and really help those around us, whether they work for us or whether they're part of our families, to manage their own stress too. Resilience is going to be a big part of this. Resilience is the capacity to recover quickly from difficulties. The great thing about living in resilience yourself and role modeling it for others and teaching is the more that we try to teach something or present something to other people, the better that we get at it ourselves. Resilience is not optimism. Optimism is definitely a coping skill, and we'll sort of talk about that one as well. But resilience is really action-oriented. It's about looking for obstacles and opportunities and being able to steer the ship effectively through those things. It puts us in a state of action, and action is incredibly important in stress management. So I'm going to go through some suggestions for ways to talk to people around you to create some low stress for them, hopefully, as well as things that you can do for yourself. So the first thing is creating the environment. I think all of us who have businesses try to create a positive work environment for people, and we know that lessens stress and makes them more productive. But now we're trying to create a remote environment where maybe we haven't done that before. So thinking about, have you created an environment now that makes your people feel safe? And whether that means talking to them about how to set up a home office or making sure that they're getting away from their screen at times is going to be important. Good communication is pretty key during a crisis in terms of helping to keep stress down for people. And during crisis, it's important to communicate more often, even if it's in small bits. So you don't want to leave big pieces of silence or times of silence for people, because when people are already stressed, they tend to fill in silence with worst case scenarios. And so communicate to your people more often. Don't overpromise or underpromise, because people need to be able to trust. But just good communication that's steady and doesn't lead to any silences helps reduce stress for your people. And you will also see later, if you look back at the PowerPoint on this slide for good communication, there are some links for how to talk to both children and teenagers about coronavirus as well, so that you can communicate with them. Straight talk is important. You want to be sort of brief and to the point with people when their brains are already full of stress. If it's a circuitous route that you're taking to get to the point, it's going to cause more stress for people versus reduce their stress in terms of your communication. It's important to empathize with people. People are under all kinds of different stress. You don't know oftentimes what's going on at home for people or how hard this might be. Listening in terms of when we're talking about communicating with your people, listening is the other important component, not just talking to them. You want to ask questions, not make assumptions, and try to be as gentle and non-judgmental of people during this time as you can. That will help them be able to talk openly to you and share with you what they need during this time from you. You want to make sure that there's space for feedback for people, so that you are listening to what they're saying about their needs during this time and what they can do, what they can't do, hopefully motivating them around what they can do. In terms of listening to people and taking feedback, if you can turn some of that feedback into action steps for them or action steps for you, that certainly makes people feel more listened to when there are action steps that come from the communication. And also action steps help reduce stress for people, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. So labeling feelings, people may, not that you're people's therapist, but you're certainly somebody important in their life that they may be sharing and venting a lot with you at this time. There's research to show that if people are able to label their feelings and share them with somebody else, that it reduces the stress hormones in their brain. So if you can listen to people and help them label what's going on for them, that will help reduce their stress. When you're talking to people, use trusted sources and try not to over-focus on the virus. So that's really been hard for people to do, and I think can be hard to do in the midst of a crisis, is not to over-focus on the crisis. But people do best in crisis if they have small bits of information at a time that are solid, good information, versus staying steeped in too much information, and particular information that is not really reliable. Constant focus on the news can really increase people's stress. So hopefully having work things that they can focus on or family things that they can focus on, give them some respite throughout the day of a focus on the virus. So self-care is the practice of taking care of your own health first. Self-care can sound a little selfish in terms of being in the midst of a crisis, but the analogy of the airline is a good analogy, where they tell you to put your mask on first, because then you're going to be far better at helping others. So to the extent that you can manage your stress first, you're going to be far better at being able to help those around you to manage their stress as well. Practicing good self-care has sort of these foundational basics of eating healthy, exercising, sleeping, and smiling. These things, research shows that all of these things reduce stress, and they're things we all know we quote unquote should be doing at any time. But in the midst of a crisis, when energy is really important and focus is really important, the extent that you can create this foundation for yourself is very important to managing your own stress. This foundation reduces the cortisol that creates stress and increases endorphins that create positive energy. Once you accept what you can't change, you want to try to take action then to change the things that you can control, because action is going to result in less daily stress. So taking action, when you figure out that you can take action, or when you can provide action for your employees to take, and identify some goals and actual steps that they can take, and set others up to do that as much as you can. We know from research that when people have a goal to work toward and when they're in a state of action, that they tend to feel more confident, they tend to feel more safe, and they tend to feel more hopeful. It's been really long understood in the field of psychology that action is sort of the superpower against depression, because it reduces time to ruminate and focus on the negative, and instead create space where people are able to feel pride in accomplishments and having completed a task. So when you've figured out what you can't control, we talk about what's called radical acceptance, which really means totally accepting the situation as it currently is. And the reason that radical acceptance makes such a difference is that that not accepting things completely in the moment and being able to move forward creates sort of this energy vampire, or takes away a lot of your energy. So you want to move from and help people move from the space of, I can't believe this is happening, this is so awful, or here are all the reasons that it happened, and just be focused on it is what it is. And once people are able to truly get to it is what it is, then that opens up a lot of emotional energy to move forward and to make progress. And it opens up the space in your mind to really be able to say to yourself, what am I going to do within this new reality? What am I going to do with this opportunity once you're at a point of radically accepting it? Promoting connectingness, it's, of course, this is hard in the time of coronavirus when we are not able to be social with one another. But research has always shown that having social connections reduces stress for people and makes people happier. So to the extent that people can keep their social connections, obviously at this point, whether it's online or email or phone, whatever people are doing, and stepping away from work, because sometimes in a crisis, it's very easy to get caught up in, how am I going to save my business? What am I going to do to keep revenue up, etc., and not step away from work. And so it's important to keep social connections in order to keep your own stress down and to help your family and kids to be able to do that as well. Kids are a little bit better about this than we are, but not all kids. So kind of check in on your kids to see how they do at this time, with connection being primarily through electronic means. So research also shows that when we have a sense of meaning in what we're doing, we tend to experience less stress. And so perhaps one of the best ways to get through a crisis is to find meaning in what you're doing at that time. This is a logo for Mothers Against Drunk Driving, which is certainly an example of somebody who took a big tragedy in their life and then found meaning in it. A lot of you may be familiar with the quote from Viktor Frankl, who was a Holocaust survivor, who said, "Life is never made unbearable by circumstances, but only by a lack of meaning or purpose." If you can find meaning, sometimes that can become shared meaning as you talk to other people about it. If it resonates with them, then that may put them in a space where they're feeling less stress and feeling more meaning in their life and what they're doing next. Related to that is sense of purpose, which really day-to-day purpose we're talking about that can lead to motivation. Instead of simply enduring the crisis, either yourself or with others, explore ways that you can find and they can find purpose during this time. So you might ask yourself, how can this make me a better person? Is there a business opportunity here? Basically look for purpose and motivation. Those are great ways to reduce stress. So finding the silver linings, this might be easier for some people than others, but really looking for silver linings in a situation, again, reduces our stress. Some people are able to exercise more now that they don't have a commute to work. Maybe you're spending more quality time with your kids or your pets or your spouse. And sharing your silver linings with others can help them to see the silver linings as well. It doesn't mean we're not still realistic about what's going on around us, but we're trying to incorporate these things so that we can reduce our overall level of stress. Having a growth mindset reduces stress as well. And every time I say reduces stress, we're really talking about the neurochemistry and what's happening in your body at the time. And these are the things that research shows reduce stress for you. So having a growth mindset means that in any moment, you're able to say in the face of adversity, it's not that's what's happening around me, it's what I choose to become through this. Can you change your life with this in some way, whether it's a small way or whether it's a larger way? And so with a growth mindset, you're asking yourself, really in any given situation, and certainly in a crisis, how can I grow through this? How can I grow as a leader? How can I grow as a friend, a spouse, a parent? A growth mindset kind of comes together with what we've talked about and meaning, and can lead to transformation. And so sort of interestingly, there's a lot of research around transformation after trauma. I think people are more familiar with post-traumatic stress and post-traumatic stress disorder, but there's also something called post-traumatic growth that there's a lot of research around. For example, after the September 11th terrorist attacks, researchers found and observed that there was heightened kindness among people, gratitude, teamwork, and overall virtues, that those things all increased in the American population. So sometimes what happens in the midst of trauma or crisis is that it kind of reminds us to be our best selves, and then people grow. Post-traumatic growth research shows that people after a trauma or a crisis have reported that they feel increased inner strength, strengthened relationships, an ability to be more hopeful, an ability to notice opportunities more often, a sense of greater appreciation for their life and for the world and for their friends and for their family. And so thinking about post-traumatic growth, not that you might not see this as a trauma, but that idea of post-crisis growth or being able to grow really reduces stress. I mentioned optimism in the beginning. Certainly optimism fosters hope, and hope, we know when people are in a space of hope, they're feeling just the opposite of stress usually. They're feeling good about the future. And so being able to be optimistic is a great coping skill for stress. Be generous with well-deserved praise and focus on the positive. So we'll talk about praise for a minute first. Humans, unfortunately, often verbalize displeasure more readily than they verbalize pleasure, and that can be in their personal lives or professional lives. But we know that when somebody receives praise, that they feel less stress, and it increases all of the positive hormones and chemistry in their brain. And so you want to give well-deserved praise at this time because it really can reduce stress for the person that you're giving praise to. The other really interesting thing about praise is that brain scans show that it also reduces the stress of the person giving the praise. So basically they feel good and the recipient feels good as well. Focusing on the positive is also important. So this is a quote from Mr. Rogers, who talked about when he would be stressed in crisis, his mother would say, well, look for the helpers. So she's kind of focusing on the positive there and helping him focus on the positive in the midst of what's going on around him. So when we think about helpers, really think about being the helper. When you help others, it reduces your stress as well as it reduces their stress because they're being helped. So to the extent that you can help people, that's going to reduce your stress. And if you have somebody in your life who's very stressed by this crisis, helping them focus on or helping them find a way that they can be a helper in their life really helps reduce their stress, because essentially we're in the teaching role then as well. And when you teach something and live something, you just internalize it in a different way yourself than if you're just talking to people about it. So it's kind of the doing versus talking. So any ways that you can be the helper or encourage people around you to find ways to help will reduce stress. Creating rituals, and especially fun rituals, is a great way to reduce stress. This is a picture that was online of a grandfather and granddaughter who currently during the virus have a dance-off every afternoon out in the street. And so any kind of fun ritual that you can create for yourself can reduce your stress. Kindness is also extremely important. Again, research shows that if you are being kind, both you and the recipient of your kindness are feeling happier and less stressed in that moment. So I like to encourage people to challenge themselves in every conversation and every interaction to be a little bit more kind and to really be asking themselves, in this moment, am I being as kind as I could possibly be? It's a fantastic stress reliever. Practicing gratitude, tons of research to show that practicing gratitude has positive effects on both your physical well-being and your emotional well-being. And that can be in all different forms. So it doesn't matter whether it's a 5-minute gratitude meditation in the morning or at night before you go to bed, or if you do a weekly gratitude journal, or something casual where at the dinner table you go around the table with your family and you all share something that you were thankful for that day. The format doesn't seem to matter, but research consistently finds that exercises like that increase life satisfaction, decrease stress, cause people to feel more optimistic, and lead people to have fewer physical health complaints. Use humor. Humor is great. Humor is absolutely fantastic for our brains. It might feel a little irreverent sometimes in crisis to use humor, but there's tons of research to show that humor increases the positive endorphins in our brain. It decreases stress. Laughing actually boosts antibodies and enhances the effectiveness of T cells. So laughter is actually found to boost our immune system. And I would say during coronavirus, we are all hoping to have as good of an immune system as we can possibly have. So using humor is a great technique. You might teach focusing on resilience to others around you. So if you notice somebody that's feeling particularly stressed, share these questions with them. These questions are designed to help people remember and connect with a time in their life when they've been resilient. So most people at some point in their lives have had a time where they've been resilient. And so by them going through and sort of remembering that and focusing on it, it helps to build their confidence and reduce their stress. It helps them feel more hopeful that they're going to get through this current time and be less stressed about that. So if we kind of go back to the circles that we started with all of the different stress reduction techniques that you can use day to day for yourself or that you can share with others, want to sort of remind you to use those things because then you're going to be able to choose your zone. You're going to be able to more easily recognize when you're falling into the fear zone, and you're going to be able to more easily pull yourself through using those different stress management skills into the learning zone or into the growth zone. I kind of like this. I mean, I think this is a great thing to kind of put on your refrigerator, certainly during stressful times, and just remind yourself of how you're approaching your day. There are a couple of slides here that will have resources for you. And there is a suicide hotline on here. Certainly when stress gets high for the nation, there are people that could get to that point of thinking of hurting themselves. So you might want to make sure that your staff have resources so that they can reach out to if anything is going on with them to that extent. And most therapists nowadays are doing online platforms, so it's actually very easy also for people to get therapy from their home during this time. So that is what I have, and I will open up the last few minutes to questions.
Tina, you just gave us a lot of information. Lots and lots of things. I want to go back. So you started with let's work on ourselves first, and then we can work on others. You talked about practicing gratitude, and you just quickly mentioned meditations, journals, dinner tables. Can you dive into a couple of those a little bit deeper? What does a gratitude journal look like if I was to do one for myself? And what is the best practice in terms of rhythm for doing that?
Sure. So the best practice is whatever you can maintain, and different people like different things. So for example, I'll say I don't like journaling, so I don't journal. But we do at my house, where we go around the table and say what were we thankful for today, or what did we appreciate today. So whatever works for you and you can sustain. A journal usually involves people writing a little bit more, saying a little bit more. Whereas a 5-minute meditation is usually just sitting quietly and reflecting on what are the things that I noticed that I'm thankful for. So whether you just reflect on it or write it down, and both of those are solitary. The other example of doing it at the dinner table is something to do with your family. You can certainly incorporate this with your staff. At our weekly staff meetings, and we've done this for years and years before this crisis came along, at our weekly staff meeting, we go around and we have what we call an appreciation round, and every staff member says thank you to somebody for something that they helped them with that week.
That's nice. Okay, that's great. And then on the so that's journaling, meditating, how to work at the dinner table. On the growth mindset, is there an activity that you recommend that specifically related to having a growth mindset, other than we should have a growth mindset?
Well, I think a lot of these things taking as little as sometimes 15 to 30 minutes to sit down and focus on it, because it's like anything else. If you were going to do something business-wise, you might sit down and create a plan, right? A business plan or a plan for what's going to come next. So it's really sitting down and focusing on it and saying, okay, maybe I'm going to put it on my schedule that for this half hour, I'm going to sit down, I'm going to work on my growth mindset. So the first thing I ask myself if I'm trying to work on, just broadly, if I was coming at it from that way, I'd say, well, do I want to focus on personal growth or professional growth? Let's say that might be an easy way. And then if it's personal growth, is it my friendships? Is it my spouse? Is it my parenting? What do I want to work on? But starting from that, and then you're kind of asking yourself, well, where are the areas I notice I could grow? Or, be brave and say, where are the areas other people have told me that I kind of am not so great at sometimes, and just think about what you're going to do. And then it's usually good to choose one or two change items. If you choose too many change items at once, it's very, very hard to to be successful with that. So if you choose one or two things that you're going to do differently, that's usually enough to try and incorporate for the next 30 days and see how those go.
So then are you saying we would pick one or two things? I want to practice gratitude, or I want to be aware of kindness, or I want to work on relationships. Pick one or two of the different things that you had in your slideshow, and then focus on those. Is the mechanism then pretty similar, whether you call it a gratitude journal or a kindness observation or a relationship connector? Are they all kind of the same mechanism?
Different. Some of those things, clearly are more interactive. So kindness is very interactive, right? Helping is interactive. There are two people there. Praise, there's somebody giving the praise and somebody hearing the praise. So there are a number of those things that you look at. You can probably break them down that way into the things that are really interactive, that you're very much doing with somebody else. Whereas there's something like, just to reduce your stress with gratitude, you can do a gratitude meditation by yourself.
That makes sense. And then what about on relationships? I guess it can be two-way, but I've also heard things like writing a letter to somebody, whether you send it or not, can be helpful, or is that not true? What is your take on it?
Relationships are really interesting at this time because, there are some people who are saying this is great for their relationships because they're spending more time together, whereas maybe before that they worked too much or their life was too full of things and they didn't have time for relationships. And other people are saying this is far too much family time and that this is really a strain on relationships. So, it can really be different how this is impacting you, but certainly it's a time for everybody if they want to work on their relationships to be able to do so. And that doesn't have to involve engaging the other person. Engaging another person can be great because you have a partner in something. So that's a good thing to have a partner, and you can even have a partner in gratitude, let's say, or you can have a partner. My daughter right now has a partner, they exercise together watching the same video at the same time, let's say. So they have a partner even though it's somewhat solitary. But you can also improve your relationships by just choosing to be a better person yourself. The kind of post-traumatic growth we talked about where people chose to be kinder and to live, more virtuous and to be engaged in more teamwork. They kind of decided to do that themselves, but it improves their relationship.
That makes sense. And just a reminder, anybody who has a question, just raise your hand or type it in the Q&A panel. We're definitely trying to make this as interactive as possible for the next few minutes of time we have with Dr. Lepage. Continuing on this thing, so you mentioned with your company that you've gone around, you've asked questions of what are you grateful for. I just attended a meeting where they settled in to begin with, which was, I haven't seen a lot of that in meetings. Have you, what are you seeing, or is that a good practice to potentially incorporate in a business setting, or do you recommend against it?
Can you describe what that looks like?
It was literally, okay, thank you for coming. Let's just take a minute here and just all settle into this call. And take 10 deep breaths. It was take 10 deep breaths is what they asked us to do.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's, if you're transitioning from one thing to another, a lot of times that can help. It depends what you want the mood to be. Sometimes when people come into a group, you want the mood to be sort of jovial and lighthearted and upbeat, and sometimes allowing chatter at the beginning sort of fosters that. But I certainly think that minute of meditation, so to speak, where you try to get all of the distractions out of your head and focus can be helpful.
Cool. On the meaning side, so there are companies it seems like that's a fine line. Are you talking about for a company potentially they could all work together to help a local food bank, or to find meaning within the organization itself and take this time to refocus that? What were you implying there? What do you recommend there?
Yeah, there's no wrong way to find meaning, right? So what you're talking about is, could there be a larger group activity that people do? That's a little bit hard in this time because you have to do these things remotely, but you certainly can have a larger group activity. And that's what I was talking about when I was saying that you can have individual meaning. Finding individual meaning reduces stress, but sometimes then you get shared meaning where you share that with somebody else and they get excited about that too. And then you're able to sort of roll that forward and create meaning for others as well, and maybe even then tie that to some action steps, because again, action steps really help reduce stress.
Yep, makes sense. We have a question from Sherritt. 1 second, I'm going to unmute you and go ahead and ask the question, Sherritt from Raleigh-Durham.
Absolutely. Hey, Tina. Thank you so much for saying this. This is awesome.
Can you hear the question? Because I'm sorry, Sherritt, I'm having trouble hearing your audio.
Oh, I'm sorry. Can you hear me now?
Uh-huh,
yeah.
That's much better.
Okay, sorry about that. I'm holding it up closer. I had a question. As a leader, you're always asked to be stoic and, know exactly where the path is headed. How do you suggest we fake that now?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think that there's something to be said for being authentic and not being stoic to the level where it makes you look like you're unfeeling or you're not really understanding or comprehending the amount of stress that's going on around you. So I think that empathizing and sharing some of your own stress is okay, but I do think that in the role of a leader, if you're sharing too much of that and people feel like you don't have this, like you don't know what's going to happen, that can actually increase their stress. So I think there's sort of a balance there, a little bit of a delicate balance for leaders with being authentic if you are having some stress, but really that you're probably the employees and people around you is not the best place for you to fully share that stress. And you might do that more among colleagues or family.
Got it. Thank you very much.
Makes a lot of sense. Going back to kids specifically, and again, we just have a few minutes left. So if you have a question and you'd like to get it in, please either raise your hand or put it in the Q&A panel. Getting back to kids, similar recommendation, Tina. I mean, there's a lot we just don't know. So how much do you tell your kids? At what age can you tell them more versus less? Are there guidelines for this?
Yeah, and I will remind people too that there are 2 links in the PowerPoint, one that talks about how to talk to little kids about COVID and one that talks about how to talk to teens about COVID. But best practice when talking to kids, obviously you're talking only at their developmental level. So with little kids, you're going to maybe share a little bit less information than with older kids who are already finding stuff online as well. Reassuring them is very helpful, but not being untruthful. I'm a very big fan of never lying to children. Just tell them if you don't know something. It's okay to not know, but still be able to say, I don't know, but everything's okay. Mom and dad have this figured out, and say what you do know and what you do have figured out. Because if kids catch you in a lie, then it just hurts credibility and trust. And then after that, it's harder for you as a parent to keep their stress low because they don't trust you. I would say be honest, stay at their developmental level, and if they've seen something on TV, though, you just have to address it.
Yeah, it's interesting. My son's 14, Tina, and we were having a discussion at dinner, and I was saying how grateful I am that we're for the people who are on the front line and doing all this, working with these very horrible situations, and where our hardship is staying at home. And he put out a text that I guess his friends were all sending to each other from some nurse who was talking about how hard it was not to have the PPE and what she's trying to do. And I was just shocked that that's what that 14-year-old peer group was talking about. A, that they were talking about it. B, that they hadn't shared that they were talking about it with me, or that he hadn't shared it with me until it just happened to come up in a dinner conversation. So that's 14 years old, and my son is not the most sophisticated kid, so it's he's just normal 14-year-old. So
I think it goes to how unique, it really goes to how unique this particular time of stress is. Just, it's unique in that it's across the nation, across the world, and that even our kids who might usually not be paying attention really much outside of their own life are paying attention to this.
Yeah. Well, Tina, we are coming right up on time. Is there any other closing words or anything else that you'd like to share with the group as we're wrapping up here?
Again, I would just remind people, this is a long list of potential coping skills and things that we know by research bring stress down. You can't leave and do every one of them, but if you really try to focus on, what are my 1 or 2 takeaways? What are the 1 or 2 things that I can go and use in my life to bring my own stress down and to help those around me, because we are in leadership roles and people do look for us to be able to help them as well. So I think there are a lot of good ways that we can bring down our stress and bring down the stress of the people around us. And I will say that I think my email and phone number is on the initial slide. So I'm very happy for any EO members who want to reach out by email or call and ask me a question. I'm always happy to talk to other EO members and try to help out.
Super nice, you, Tina. Thank you so much. Todd, you want to put some last words in?
No, thank you, Tina. It was really, really great to hear all this and a lot of things to think about. Matt, you want to let us know about one more time about what we've got next?
So quick checklist here. Amy Henning is our chapter manager, gets all the invitations. She's going to email everybody the deck and a follow-up on this webinar. The deck, Tina's information, the deck, and this recording will be at eoraleigh.com/coronavirus. That is also where you can sign up for the next 3 webinars. Feel free to pass on the links to your chapter and other community members. This information we're just trying to get out to as many people as possible. And finally, both Todd and my email is in the chat panel. And if you have any suggestions or thoughts on how we can do what else you'd like to hear for learning, we would be happy to do our best to get that content to you. Again, thanks everybody. Thanks Tina for doing this. I really appreciate your time and a lot of great things here. Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.
Thanks, Tina. Bye, everybody.
Bye.